Sherlock Holmes, sharper than a razor and by far.
Hello and welcome to Up in the Attic, War Stop number 3. Now if you remember last time I was talking about the lamp that we used to have in the farm, and we actually activated it. It was our main source of light during the whole war. And here it is here, a light. This was as much light you got from it. There it is there. The very, very lamp I started cleaning that in about 1943 or something. I used to get praise from my mother and father for cleaning it all those years ago, and that's that very, very lamp. And now this is the lamp that during the raids we would actually turn the light down, even though all the windows used to be blacked up with it, because you had to put blacking over the window, black cloth. But you still somehow or other you turned the lamp down when the enemy planes were overhead. It just automatically, you couldn't help doing it really. It seemed a sensible thing to do. Anyway, there it is there, that very, very lamp. So that means quite a lot to me really. And then of course another time you would turn it down was when you would hear this sign here, this sound. Now listen to this. That's the all clear sound. This is the one that puts a smile on your face. A lot of them, of course, were electric, but just in case the electricity packed up, they would have a standby mechanical one, and that sound travels an awful long way. It brings back sort of memories to me. And there's a very ironical thing about this machine that is worthwhile recalling, and that is that when the Americans dropped the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, the sound the local people heard was the all clear. Will you believe it? Just before the Eleanor Gay came over and dropped the nuclear bomb, what had happened was the Americans sent 2 planes before the plane carrying the bomb over to check the weather and the wind direction and this, that and the other. And then when they left, the local Japanese people turned this thing here and gave them the all clear sign. So people in actual fact came out. So what an irony. The bomb that's killed most people probably ever should have had a warning of all clear before the bomb was dropped. We've got a few little novelties again for you to have a look at, and I'll show you them. 2 of them here. You probably recognise what they are. They're wire cutters. But the interesting thing about these 2 wire cutters, this one was made towards the end of the First World War. This one was made at the beginning. And now you probably remember that people, the soldiers, before they went up over the trenches and through the wire entanglement, they actually had to cut holes at night time through the wire. Now can you imagine cutting barbed wire with a cutter like this? So your hands get caught in there like that, and you've got to, in the pitch black dark, you've got to try and get the wire in these little cutters here. So what it meant was the soldiers cut a very narrow path through the barbed wire, simply because it took a long time to do it, making it much easier for the Germans with their machine guns to shoot the soldiers coming through a narrow patch sooner than a wider patch. But later on they developed this cutter here. Now this is so much better, but because you just go towards the barbed wire and the wire just automatically slips in there. Much better cutter altogether. So a lot of people died simply because of these foolish wire cutters where you catch your hands on them. It's quite amazing really that you would have thought that life somehow or other would have been considered a little bit, you know, more account given to something like that. It just shows you how the the people at the top didn't really know very much about what the soldiers had to do. And then they say, as we hear them say now, that they gave their lives in the way that they did. Well, I've got a little poem here which I'll just read. Words of an imagined dead soldier. This is about the sacrifice which so often we claim they made. The sacrifice seems so much greater when they say, I gave my life. But is it true? Will it do if it's not true? When my life was taken and not forsaken, it will not do. Please be true when I'm the one who died, not you. Something else that's interesting and very, very rare, this is. When the soldiers were sitting in the muddy trenches wondering what to do, they could play games. Here's one game. There we are. This is what they could do when they had time sitting in the trenches wondering what to do. Play board games. This is called the Dash to Berlin. Very rare. These things are very rare because who would bring one of these back when you've been stuck in the trench for weeks and weeks? And then you played this game here with a little a dice and one thing another. And there we are. The winner was there. It's Belgium, Russia, France and Great Britain. You could be one of those 4 countries in the game. And here's another game. This is a solitary game for one soldier only, I suppose, when he's on duty, standing there waiting for something to happen. And the silver bullet, it's called. And what the idea is, you get the bullet and you take it along these lines here. We've all seen these things as children. You've got to get the little bullet there somewhere until you I've lost it at Leipzig, and you've got to, the idea is to try and get it to Berlin. Of course, they never got to Berlin because the war ended before basically before there was any fighting in Germany. But very well-made piece of equipment, but very rare indeed. Yeah, so now I can tell you a little bit more about my experience as a boy living on a farm in Sussex, because it was a time that as I mentioned before, a lot of what went on when I overheard my father talking to people, his friends and one thing and another, a lot of the time I didn't know what he was talking about, because as a young boy you just sit around the fire and you just listen, you didn't say anything. And so much of the work was done in the dark, because we had cows. I think we had about 20 cows at the time, and they all had to be milked by hand. And so you have a lantern, and it was quite dark, and candles. Well, of course, with the candle would easily blow out, and that was our main source of light there. As you can see, you don't get much light from that. And then there's so many other things we had to do, rather like the forecasting the weather. In those days, the radio, and you had radio forecast of weather. It was no better than you or I could forecast ourselves. And Shepherd's Delight and things like that, carried quite a lot of weight. And so you go out in the morning and you look up at the sky and you assess what the weather was going to be, as well as you could do, because it was so important in those days, because everything took so much longer and a lot of things depended on the weather. For instance, when it became haymaking time, you had to do things very, very quickly, because you didn't have the equipment that people have today, and the same with the harvesting. the harvesting, you had to cut the corn and make it into stooks, and then you had to stand those up to dry, and then you had to pick them up and then make a stack. You actually make a corn stack, well, like a haystack, only it's these sheaves of corn, until you were able to get the thrashing machine that would come round in the winter time and thrash the corn for you. So it was very important that this was done during dry weather, and sometimes it was very difficult to do. And if you were unlucky and the weather was, you didn't get the weather right, you would lose all your crop, and that could be quite disastrous at that time, because there was a shortage basically of everything. Now, I've already mentioned about my experience of what I thought Germans were, because I was only a boy at the beginning of the war, and my experience of, or my expectation of Germans was, here we are, look. You see, there's a German there with a baby on the end of his bayonet. I mean, a wicked thing to do, really, because it's purely propaganda, but this is the sort of thing that they do. They lie. No, how can you possibly move into the future? How can we possibly stop wars unless we're truthful and honest about things? Because all that does is encourage people to denigrate the other side. And so when this I mentioned, we had a German prisoner of war actually living in the house, and during the war, in actual fact, and sleeping in the room next to me. And I know there was no lock on the door, and I thought, goodness me, what's he going to do if he could come in and kill me? Because that is what nasty Germans like that do. But then when he turned up, I was very surprised. Nothing like that at all. There he is. He was just a young, well, to me he was quite an old, but I mean he was probably about 24, Reinhard Gröling. And he was an ex-submariner, and a very nice, like all nice guys, he was, probably he wanted no more than any of the other soldiers who fought in that war. They wanted a wife, a home, a husband, wife, family, holidays. That's all they want, and yet they are forced to go to war because of the warmongers. And just a few more here as well. Oh, that was me there about 1946, I suppose. I think the war had just ended, and there I am in a cadet's uniform, army cadet's uniform, and I was so proud at the time. I just had a watch, and I made sure that the watch could be seen. You can see it there. Because the watch was something quite important. Not many people had a watch. In fact, when you were wandering around the farm or different places, one of the things that people would say, "Oh, got the time on you, mate?" Because a lot of people didn't have watches, and of course you didn't have a radio like they've got today. I mean, our radio it had two batteries. One was a big dry battery like that, about that size, and the other one was an accumulator. And it's rather like a car battery, and you had to take that to a garage and get it charged up. And when they ran out, the radio just got quieter and quieter and quieter. And I used to listen to some of the plays on the radio, and they got closer and closer and closer and closer to the loudspeaker, and I could just about hear. And sometimes I couldn't hear the end, and it was so frustrating when you hear some sort of story and you couldn't hear what the end was. Anyway, so that was, so that's me there. Then later on, well, my father, he was against the war because he said the Zionists started this war and they're going to get us city fools to fight it. And he often said that I never knew who the Zionists were. Anyway, there's my aunt. My aunt, but she did her part there, and she was in the NAFI. Or she ran. She's quite high up in the NAFI in actual fact, and there she is being talking to the Queen mother at the time, and there's a NAFI. There's a little NAFI van there. Look, and can you see the white lines round the edge of the mud guards? That was to assist people to see the vans at night time, because the lights were subdued. Then later on, of course, I joined the Navy and signed on for 12 years. I didn't actually do 12 years because I had a problem with my back. But there we are. That's me there down at Weymouth with a fag in my hand. Don't smoke now. Then later on, well, in actual fact, at that particular time, I was on this ship here, training on this ship here, HMS Vanguard. It's, in Cape Town. She went down there and took the royal family, and there's the royal family below it, below that photograph there. Lovely, lovely looking ship. Never went to war, but it was a lovely ship to be on. A number of times I got lost on that ship. You know, when you're down inside, sometimes you didn't know whether you were facing front, this way, or backward, forward or aft. You meet people on there, you might only see them once. Quite amazing. And then later on, I served for a very brief period on this ship here, which is now moored in the Thames, and you frequently see it on the television, HMS Belfast. And although I was ship's company on that ship, I never sailed and never went anywhere on her. She came back from Korea, and I was on her for about 3 months, but nevertheless I was ship's company, and now I'm one of the veterans of HMS Belfast, so at least I can say, you know, I was on there for a while. Anyway, so that's enough for now, I think. So next time I'm going to talk a little bit more about the about how we went to war, because the whole object of this is, you know, I'm against war. And I think we've got to have a different approach to it. All the time we accept the views that are expressed to us by the politicians, we're going to have wars. So we've got to try and overcome this. And I think the only way to overcome it is we need the truth. The truth is it will free us. But we must have the truth, because they have propaganda before the war, they have propaganda during the war, and they have propaganda after the war. And one of the biggest problems at the moment, this is now, 2017, is the build-up of the Cold War with Russia, because this is what they did with Germany. The war was gradually built up from the time that Hitler came to power in 1933, and that's when the Zionists declared war on Germany. And they were never going to do the fighting. How could they? But they got someone else to do it, and who did they get to do it? The Christians. The two most developed Christian countries in Europe, they got them to fight each other. And as I've said before, that I don't think we could have gone to war with Germany if we referred to the Germans as German Christians. We had to call them something else, and then we had to denigrate them in every way we possibly could, give no grounds for anything that they did that was worthwhile, denigrate everything that Hitler did. Not one little bit do you ever hear, one little aspect that Hitler did where someone might have said, oh, that was a good thing he did. But do you really think that the German people would think that Hitler was, he's a nasty bastard, we'll vote for him? They must have thought there was something good about him. So what is it? So let's look at things properly, instead of looking things with the propaganda that we have that is so tainted. Because if you want to move ahead, you've got to understand. That's it. Anyway, hope to see you next time. Bye now.
Sherlock Holmes, sharper than a razor and by far. The most intellectual man on crime, can solve many problems in half the time. Sherlock Holmes, a dapper figure who is awfully bright.